Welcome to Curiosity Meets the Past, a podcast for curious minds who love learning about the past. My name is Smiti Nathan, and I'm an archaeologist and your host. In this episode, I'm speaking with Jaime, a podcast producer and the host of ReCurrent at the Getty Museum. Jaime's work sits at the intersection of sound and living heritage, and we'll talk about that term a little later in this episode. The way he approaches his work, though, is what really stands out. He meets people where their stories are, and he shows us that we can still hear the past all around us in music, voices, streets, and communities. Now, you don't have to listen to Recurrent to follow this episode. Our conversation focuses on how his own past influences his storytelling, sound design, and living heritage, and how Recurrent surfaces underrepresented stories about the past that still resonate with us today. He starts us off by sharing an unexpected sound that often takes him back to a specific moment in his past.
When I hear TV shows that my parents used to watch when I was a kid, like it brings me back. Or a big one is even just watching the 6 o'clock news and specifically in Spanish, the Univision. This this kind of brings me back to the past. And my mom cooking, my siblings and I playing or doing homework or just getting in from playing, and then like my dad coming home from work. So that sound really does bring me back to that moment. We're kind of close to Dia de Muertos. It's a holiday that I now revere a lot and really practice a lot. But it's kind of similar in that way. Like, you put up their favorite foods, their favorite drinks, all these things, pictures. But it's like that bridge to the past because you believe that they're coming back to visit you. And so you set out these favorite things for them. So on their journey, they can come back. And so again, it's like a reliving experience, like a nostalgia experience. The food connects me, the sound connects me, and all of that.
So, thank you so much for sharing that vivid example. And I'm curious, how has sound or even music shaped you as a storyteller?
It's shaped me a lot just because I feel like I come from that background. So that's at the forefront of, recurrent episodes all the time. And it's something that I think about a lot in post production, the sound design of things, the transition, using music to transition from one idea to the other, but still using music to kind of evoke the message that I want to give to transition you into, like, let's say I'm going into like this really deep thought, like I think of like that musical cue as being like the first part of that transition. Okay, to get you in the mood, I got to bring in, the sound design, and then we go into it. And also something that I've had to kind of learn to just let go and like let it breathe is something we call real world audio. Basically what that is just the sounds that you hear when I'm out in the field. So a lot of the stories, I'm off the hill. And when we say off the hill, Getty's on this hill in LA. So like I like to go out into the community to where these other stories are found. And so when I'm out in the field, I really like to get the soundscapes of the neighborhoods I'm in, the city. I usually meet the guests where they're at if we're meeting to grab a bite. And I record there, so you'll hear people walking by, cars, birds, all these things that I feel are very, very important because stories are found out in the community. Season 2 kind of deals with a lot of that. And what I've had to let go of is this audio engineering side of me of wanting to just clean up the audio. And I'm sure every podcaster and audio engineer and editor will hopefully resonate with what I'm saying. But, the first thing you kind of learn is just like, oh, we need clean audio. Yeah, right? We need clean audio. And you do. I completely agree. But when I'm out in the field, like I want to let the real world sounds breathe. Because another thing about the podcast is we're on a journey together. We're learning these subjects together. So you're out there in the field with me, and you're in the studio with me as I'm reflecting on what I'm learning and the journey that I've been on. But no, there's a beauty I think in letting this audio breathe and be alive and recurrent, just because it's such a big part of it. Like I'm out in the field, I'm out in the community, I'm talking to people, I'm meeting them where they're at. we're not in a studio, and but that also leads to really nice conversations, or really nice solid conversations where I get to know them on a deeper level, and it helps them open up a little bit more to me, when I'm asking certain questions. So, sound definitely huge part of the way I approach storytelling now.
Got it. And, when you were speaking, it reminded me of being an archaeologist in some ways. You go into the field, you're doing field work, and I love that you preserve that sound that you are finding and encountering. And, often with archaeologists, we have to take what we find back to the lab in some way. So the parallel I'm drawing there is post-production and sound engineering. So I am curious, how do you decide what sounds to use to reflect the past? Do you have a strategy or a thought process around that that you would be willing to share?
I sound design each episode. I believe each one is unique and has its own breadth and own space. And so if you listen to all the episodes, you're going to notice, when I say, hi, my name is Jaime, welcome to Recurrent, like in the beginning, the intro music is going to be different for each one. And that's intentional, just because each sound design for each episode is different. And again, very intentional, because I'm going with the story. I'm going with the theme of what I'm trying to tell, the emotion that I'm trying to evoke. So it's very individual for each one. And, I hope people notice that. And I hope, people appreciate the time and effort that it takes to, either create or even just dig through a sound library just to look for, because even that takes time. When you're not creating something, you're still digging through a sound library. It takes time. So I definitely appreciate the art of sound design. Just because it adds so much layer and depth to what you've layered on top, like the person and the narration that you're writing.
Got it. So there's a bit of archival work that's going into even the sound design of the stories you're telling, which is pretty cool. So, speaking of stories, you are telling stories on Recurrent. And one of the things I love about the podcast is that you are surfacing stories that are often underrepresented or might otherwise not get told. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about that.
The initial thought for Recurrent was me being off the hill, and I keep referencing off the hill. There's a lot of amazing stories here at Getty, at the Getty Center, the Getty Villa. You can do multiple seasons of podcast episodes here, and we do have, we have Recording Artists, which kind of deals with archives. If Objects Could Talk, which is a kids podcast that deals with artwork. But the way that I wanted to approach Recurrent was, again, really just looking at how deep Getty's roots run in the community and in the work that they're doing. And like you said, in like more underreported, underrepresented stories. Example, the barbershop episode that I did for season one. At least in my view, and a lot of people I've talked to here around, they're like, yeah, you don't really associate like Getty and a barbershop. He's like, Getty was doing work to help preserve this barbershop, the oldest black owned barbershop in LA. And so I thought, like, wow, this is such a really cool story to tell. And then looking at how Getty helped do work for a mural on Placita Alvera here in LA downtown, America Tropical, and just the significance that that had. And even now, there's a lot of, resonances from that story that are happening now. One, Getty's doing work in the community that deserves more shine. It gets its shine, but, deserves it in another angle. And then also stories that I resonated with. So the barbershop story I resonated with. I like to cut my hair, since we were kids, me and my brothers have been cutting our hairs. And so, and then there's this whole barbershop culture that goes on. There's storytelling that goes on within those spaces that kind of just like lives in the moment. No one's recording it, but it just lives in the moment. I mean, you can even say it could be considered almost like oral histories that get passed down there. Like, my grandpa or my, came here. And in Stylesville, in that episode, Greg Fawcett, he told me that he has generations of customers coming. So there's that. And then there's like the hidden histories of, America Tropical. Like I said, oh my goodness, like I've gone there for so many years and I never knew. There's like a whole museum there. It's just rediscovering and finding new things within the city is just amazing. And again, going back to, you just how I go about picking these stories is just finding stories that I resonate with, and I feel like the broader community would be interested in.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for walking us through your process of which stories you might resonate with and why you choose to pick certain stories. And when I was listening to your podcast, you often mentioned this term in certain episodes of living heritage. And I'm curious, after shooting the first season of Recurrent, what has that term now come to mean to you?
Yeah, and and I'm totally coming at this from like my perspective of like doing the show and producing the show and talking to people, and it just kind of almost feels like we don't know we're living in the heritage of the now until afterwards. There's an episode for season 2 where, and I'm trying to remember the phrasing because I'm working on it right now, but it's the playlists, the flyers, the artwork, or the concerts that we're preserving like in our pockets or in our phones now. They're the like kind of like the living heritage of the now, but then it becomes like cultural heritage when time passes and when someone keeps or deems it important enough to them to keep it. And then it goes through kind of like after time passes, and then then becomes like this like cultural heritage type of thing. A lot of the my like living heritage, or like the heritage that I deem important, is important to me because it was like photos of my parents, photos of my sister, photos of my past. Those are important to me. And then if I keep them long enough, maybe it'll become more, it'll develop into something that could be held in an archive or anything like that. But the notion of this living heritage, it's almost like maybe we don't know we're living it, but then it becomes after a while, after you realize and reflect, oh, yeah, the second episode of Recurrent I did on George Rodriguez, this amazing photographer. And one of the things that he brings up is like, I didn't know I was living history. Now I realize I was, but at the time I was just documenting what was in front of me because I felt it was important to me. And then it ended up being history that he lived throughout. So, and then I just got so much inspiration from George that of like documenting and then like what it could become afterwards, that now I try to document as much as I can through sound, through audio, and through video, even if it's just for me personally.
Got it. And that's such a great example. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more about how shooting these episodes of Recurrent has maybe changed or added to your own documentation process that you were just alluding to.
I don't think I've talked about this on a podcast, but when my dad was really sick, and you kind of know it's coming to the end, I had him write down his life story in a book. And my thinking there was, I want to preserve one this story for me, for me just to be able to read and have this connection back to him once he had passed, and then also for future generations of my family. Him and my mom were they immigrated here, they made their life here, had their children here. And so I thought it was important to document that for the future generations that came to know, like, basically you're here because of this person and this person. Read the story, like, know your history, right? Like, pay your dues almost, by reading. And so I did that, and I recorded my mom's life story and audio, and pictures here and there. But now, since that and since doing the podcast, it's just changed completely. I document, I don't want to say everything, but it feels like I document everything. I mean, I'm that person that has a camera on the weekends who's just taking pictures. There's a couple like personal things that I do to preserve sound and a picture. So like I'll take a picture of a place, and then I'll record like 15 to 20 seconds of sound in that moment. And again, this is all things for me that I enjoy doing and have done more since doing the podcast. I'm preserving things that I find important, like flyers, or just like tangible things, and then the intangible stuff of like sound, pictures, video. I mean, a big reason I bought, these glasses that I'm wearing is because I want to be able to capture moments without having to take out, a device or something. So I'm always trying to fight that fine line of living in the moment and also documenting it and then just not losing that perfect moment. So I bought these to, hit a button and let it record and let me still be in the moment. And then again, letting me relive it afterwards. I'm constantly fighting that fine line. So I document, take pictures, video, audio more than ever, and I post the least amount I have ever in my life. Like, I do it for me, and I got an inspiration like a lot from George too, saying, "Oh, I just did it for me." Like I wanted to document, and I really do document all these things for me. I don't. I'll be honest, I'm hardly on socials anymore. I should be a little bit more, but a lot of the stuff is for me, and I think that's where a lot of the good moments or like the care comes out, just because you're doing it for you. You're not doing it to get a like or go viral. So you're trying to capture that really special moment for you. It's all here. It all stays in house for me, at least for that.
Thank you for sharing a bit into your process. You gave me some good ideas as well.
Yeah.
Documenting things for my family that, we might not post online, or maybe we will, but it's important for us to preserve. And one of the things you often say on Recurrent is keeping the past present. And how would you like listeners to do that for themselves after hearing your work, or even after hearing this conversation?
It almost feels like, the prior answer I gave could also relate to this one, because it's just about documenting your community. And again, do it because you want to do it. Like you like to do it, not because, again, at least in my experience, not chasing clout or not doing it to go viral or anything. It's like doing it genuinely because you want to document, you want to preserve it, you want to keep these things that are present now for you in the future. And I think the stuff that I talk about, keeping the past present, is someone who has documented a concert, a photo, a lecture, or anything, and it's survived long enough to be relevant to me or to anybody. And again, anything can be relevant to anyone, but the things I talk about in ReCurrent is like they're relevant to what we do here at Getty, and it resonates with me as well. And then I keep it in the present, and then hopefully by me keeping it in the present, it keeps going down that line. Creates more ripple effects that will keep these important stories of heritage and art and community just moving forward. So the next person that it hits, maybe 30, 40 years down the line, oh, that was cool. Let me do research now what has happened since, this story premiered. And then they continue that. And so it's like this continuation of keeping the past present. And I'm just trying to do my small part in telling these stories to hopefully preserve them for future generations to listen to.
One of my biggest takeaways from this conversation is that sound can be a powerful bridge between the past and the present. Preserving that sound through storytelling can be meaningful for both personal and public living heritage. If you'd like to follow Jaime's work, you can check out the Recurrent podcast at getty.edu/recurrent. You'll find that linked below in the show notes, along with a full transcript to this episode. And if you'd like to hear more from Jaime, he gives us his recommendations on which Recurrent episodes to check out in our Patreon exclusive bonus segment. Our Patreon is free to join and gives you access to all of our bonus content. If you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, we'd of course appreciate that too. Thanks so much for listening and cultivating your curiosity with us. We'll see you soon.